We did not go into our marriage expecting it to fall apart. Yet 20 years in, we separated because the pain between us was too high to stay together. What we have learned since then are the 5 reasons that happened, and we want to share them with you so you don't need to walk through the suffering that we did. Hi, we are Jeff and Julia Woods, and we have been married for over 3 decades and are passionate about helping couples by sharing the excruciating lessons we have learned the hard way so you don't have to. As a couples coach, I help couples around the world to apply these lessons and grow strong marriages. If you want to be a part, make sure you click the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And in the comments below, please share if there's anything you want me to share about in an upcoming episode. Let's jump into the first of 5 things we now see contributed to our marriage falling apart. The first and biggest one is avoiding personal responsibility. Personal responsibility is focusing solely on your contributions to how things are turning out. In a relationship, both parties are always contributing to how things are. Each of you have your beliefs, your thoughts, attitudes, tones, reactions, and responses in every interaction. What you choose impacts how things turn out. Taking personal responsibility means you take 100% responsibility for your contributions, even if your contributions are only 5% of what's producing the current results. For years, we both took no personal responsibility. Instead, we spend our time focusing on our spouse's responsibilities. Most conflicts were spent pointing out what the other person did that they shouldn't have done. That was at the heart of destroying our marriage. What do you think this looked like for you?
Well, I think for me is I looked at I just wanted to just went along, just kind of not wanting to rock the boat per se. I didn't ask questions. I didn't take responsibility for having a voice. And I allowed you to kind of just lead. You know, I came from that style of home where my mom was a vocal leader. And so I just fell into that here in our marriage. Allowing you to lead everything in that way and allowed me to sit back and find complaints in you and in a situation. So we both have a hero and we both have a villain. That way of being in our marriage allowed me to sit back and be the villain, which was me just complaining about the marriage, about the relationship, about you.
What shifted?
What shifted was owning that. What am I contributing to the breakdown in the relationship? What was my responsibility? What was I doing? Where was I not showing up? Where was I playing small in the marriage?
And for me, I just really longed for him to partner with me in life, but I didn't take responsibility to communicate what I wanted in a way that you could actually hear me or understand. I just kept complaining and whining and nagging and griping. And I wasn't actually making clear requests and negotiating with you how to set up the home and how to set up, co-parenting. And, ultimately it brought me to do the number 2 reason we recognized our marriage was falling apart, which was blaming each other. Now, as humans, when something doesn't go the way we want it to, our instinct is to look for someone or something to blame. And let's face it, in a marriage, our spouse is the easiest candidate. We were sure that each other was the problem. He blamed me for my need to control things and felt like that was the biggest problem in the marriage. And I blamed him for his lack of willingness to show up and help me in life and raising the kids and running the household. But the truth was we'd set it up that way so that we could blame each other, because blaming each other was easier than working on ourselves. Because the truth is when you're blaming the other person, you don't look at yourself and what you're contributing that isn't working to the marriage. The problem is the more we blamed each other, the more we resented each other. Over time, it became really hard to see the best in each other because all we could see was the worst because that's all we were focused on. Can you share a little bit about how this looked for you?
Well, it was easy for me to blame you for control, which in all honesty was just a sign that I wanted control of the situation. And, there's obviously the blaming you of lack of intimacy, AKA sex. And I made judgments. I made judgments of a lot of things, but I think how I was brought up, I believe I had a lot of strong misconstrued judgments of women and, and then in the home. So I blamed you for things that if things didn't go right with the kids, I would blame you. It took the blaming you takes, it allows me to show up small and takes the pressure off me that I can't be relied upon. And if something didn't go right in life, I didn't look at my part. I looked at yours. It's easy to look at your partner and point out all the faults. Mm-hmm. We've all heard that saying, you got one finger pointed at you got 4 pointed back at yourself. But yeah, I feel that was a big part of me just being able to blaming you took the pressure off me. You like to control the narrative, you like to control the outcome. So I was not willing to look at your point of view. I had already judgments in my mind that my view was correct or not necessarily better, but maybe a little bit better of a view. It is what it is, but so yes, I wasn't really willing to let your point of view and blame.
Yeah. And for me, I focused on what you weren't doing and what you weren't helping with. Mm-hmm. And,
which was a lot.
Yeah. And that's the system we set up. We didn't talk about how to divide household responsibilities, which wasn't by accident. We set up what was comfortable to us.
Yeah.
And, I was constantly focused on what you weren't doing. And as long as I was focused on blaming you and waiting for you to change in order for, me to have what I wanted, then I wasn't recognizing that my approach in my communication was my biggest contribution. People don't respond when they're being blamed in any way other than defensiveness. And defensiveness cannot create connection or create something new. So this was blocking us from having curious conversations to form partnerships, because we were doing the third reason our marriage fell apart, which was avoiding reconciling conflicts.
That's a big word. Explain.
Yeah. When conflicts or disagreements arose, our go-to was emotional outbursts like crying or yelling, and yours was shutting down and refusing to talk. This is how conflicts would end. I would storm out of the room and he would shut down, and we would go our separate ways to cool off. Hours, days, sometimes weeks would go by without either of us talking about the upset. We would just talk about, the things that needed to be discussed about the kids or meals or whatever to get through the day's activities. And then eventually one of us would reach for the other. We love physical connection with each other. We love to snuggle and touch. So one of us would decide, okay, I'm done not, laying on the couch with you at night. So let me just reach out and, pat you on the shoulder or whatever. And that is, what we called reconnecting. And then, we would ignore or briefly discuss the conflict that had caused the original disconnection and call that reconciling. But over time, the unreconciled conflicts were building up and destroying our marriage because we were building bitterness and resentment. So what did that look like on your end?
I would just shut down, go to shame, become very quiet, and avoid conversations and really just avoid you. Be like two ships passing in the night is kind of a good phrase that I could use and we would use back then. And I really became what we have called it, described as a petty tyrant. And I made you walk on eggshells. And I made the kids, sadly, walk on eggshells as well. It was like, okay, stay away from dad. He's in one of those moods. Or, stay away from mom. She's in one of those moods. So we really created an environment of really not being safe. Not physical danger, but more maybe emotional danger. So what was needed was for me just to kind of stay in it. And what I'm learning about myself now is ask questions, become more curious as to, like you said, we would talk about top of the iceberg stuff. We didn't really go below the surface and allow those conversations. So we really kind of, we could, and I'm very good at putting on a mask. I'm very good of letting things go. However, one of us in this relationship is also wears her emotions on her sleeves. So I was able to avoid a lot of that because I didn't ask questions as to what was happening for you and what were you feeling and what did you want and what did you need in that moment.
Yeah. For me, when we weren't reconciling conflict, then, in those hours or days or weeks that we would stay separated, in my mind, I was ruminating about how hurt I was by the things that you had said or the things that you did or, how I just didn't feel appreciated. And so as I, ran over and over in my head, all my judgments about you, about how selfish and uncaring you were, I just kept getting more and more positioned in my need to protect myself from you. And I built walls in my heart that grew bitterness and resentment rather than looking, at how mean and selfish I was being and asking for forgiveness for my part. All I was doing was building my case against you. And at this point, when conflict arises, I really do see it as a gift. I'm able to, it doesn't mean I do this well. Just this morning, we were really struggling and I was not, last night and this morning, I was not showing up in who I'm committed to be. At the same time, I was committed to resolve the conflict. I knew there was gold waiting for us. And so I got more heated than I want to be, and I got more probably blamey than I want to be. And at the same time, we kept working at it and reconciled. This morning, we went to bed at peace, and we, got up this morning, and I realized, okay, I'm still feeling disconnected. What's the conversation that we need to have? And we worked to stay in it and keep figuring out what was needed for each of us to feel heard and seen. And when you can resolve the conflict rather than letting that loneliness, that frustration, that disconnection just go on, it really is powerful for keeping the connection alive in the marriage.
Yeah, just because you put the swords away, which our swords were up last night. We were swords up. Although the swords were put away, we were, doesn't mean the war was over. Or in this case, I guess it wasn't really a war, but it was a being comfortable in the uncomfortable. We were both knew that there wasn't some closure to the situation.
Yeah. And just as a side note, we don't look for closure like we're not trying to resolve a conflict. What we're trying to do is figure out what are we understanding newly in this moment and what is one new action we'll take moving forward. The conversation we got hooked on last night was a conversation we've been fighting about for decades. And the conflict has up-leveled a lot. We don't fight in near the way we used to, but this conflict is likely not going to go away. It's just one that keeps getting to up-level as we keep learning something new and trying something new each time. It's getting much, it's getting resolved. It's getting improved a lot. So that brings us to the fourth thing that we were contributing to our marriage demise, which was not prioritizing each other. Now, life can be extremely busy with growing careers and raising children and pursuing status and school and church programs, and socializing can fill our days and weeks so full that time for resolving conflict, pursuing friendship and connection with each other, it's easy to avoid. Now, we let growing our business and raising our 4 kids be an excuse not to pursue each other. We did our date nights, but they were cliche date nights, and we didn't do them very consistently, and they were usually spent fighting. The truth is, it was easier to be busy than to face that growing bitterness between us because of how we were, blaming each other and, not resolving conflict. Our time together was spent telling the other what they should or shouldn't be doing. We didn't respect each other's desires or partner with one another in raising our children or growing a business. We didn't let ourselves need each other. So avoiding each other was easier.
Ouch. Right. So for me, it was more, I'm an only child, so it's easy for me to think about myself first. I didn't ask what you needed or what you think, or think about serving you in a way as I do now. For me, it was just, I prioritized myself in a lot of ways, financially, monetarily, physically, emotionally. So I left it up to you to organize the dates, and just, again, that whole let you lead and I'll just buy in. I'll just show up for the date, not being fully present in the date. The date was more about, like you said, what argument or business or what this kid did or what that kid did and so forth. So it was really never getting to understand each other. And this was 20 years into our marriage, and there were still things that we didn't know about each other that we still even uncover today. And what changed a lot of that is beginning to practice gratitude and being able to be soft to surrender to what was wanted and needed for you, even now we have adult kids. What do they need? Surrendering to what their wants and needs are just as much as your needs as well. What I begin to do is shift as started practicing an attitude of gratitude and being able to surrender to my own needs, to my own desires as much, like allowing my ego to take a back seat in a lot of ways was the reason for, having gratitude and being grateful for what I have and grateful for what's to come.
What does practicing gratitude mean to you?
To me, it's a constant state of being grateful. Even in the toughest of situations, like where can I find gratitude in this moment that is very uncomfortable or very fearful for me?
So it happens in your mind?
Happens
you
in
think
my
about
mind.
it?
I can sometimes speak it out loud. Just last night, I had a moment of where I really needed to be grateful because I did not want to do something. I did not want to do it, and when I did it, Julie and I both do a lot of cold baths, ice plunging, and last night mentally, I just wasn't wanting to be there. I wasn't wanting to do the ice bath. It was 45 degrees and dark, and just mentally, it was a mental fight. And so as I sat in the cold plunge for 3 minutes, it was a constant affirmations of being grateful that I'm doing something. I am making my health better. I'm, making my body work better. And the gratitude is like, I'm going to be able to run with my grandkids. I'm going to be able to live a long life as a part of this. So that was the gratitude of just speaking it out loud as affirmations. Sometimes it is just in my head. I don't need to speak it out loud, but that moment, if you've ever done an ice plunge, sometimes you can't even think. So you actually just begin to speak. So that's where that came from. And I think that one of the biggest things, that surrendering, was just begin to act in a way where I asked you if there was something that you wanted and needed, even in the littlest of things, like if I'm getting up, do you want a drink? Do you want me to make you some hot tea? And that was a really way of me serving others. Because up until then, I was very selfish. I didn't really act on serving others like I do today.
So what I hear you saying is that you recognize that you greatly contributed to by not prioritizing me or not prioritizing the kids and instead prioritizing yourself. And that you found that when you started expressing gratitude, doing, gratitudes in your mind and things like that, your heart softened and you wanted to serve.
Mm-hmm.